So talk to me a little bit about Rex Tillerson, because he's getting a lot of positive feedback from people like Condoleezza Rice and James Baker and Bob Gates and people that I've spoken to who've been part of the, of talking to him, say that he is very impressive. What do you think?
Well, I think their commendations were somewhat measured and cautious, and I personally know of no one who thinks this is a wise nomination. Martha, we have some real problems. Now, I'm impressed with much of what the President-elect has already done. The people he's nominated, like Kelly and Mattis, for cabinet positions, taking on Lockheed Martin, taking the phone call with Taiwan, all good stuff. But there's this weird stumbling block where the President-elect will not ever criticize Vladimir Putin for anything. Ever. He just praises the guy. No matter the atrocities in Syria, no matter the threats, he won't criticize him. And now you have them floating the idea of Rex Tillerson, CEO of ExxonMobil, to be Secretary of State. It is a terrible idea. This is a guy who pals around with Putin, who got the Orden Druzhby, the Order of Friendship, from Putin. The last thing we need at a time when Putin is trying to harm NATO, trying to subvert the EU, trying to subvert democracy, is a guy who thinks Putin's great.
Look, I understand what you're saying, but, look back at the last 8 years. Vladimir Putin has been so aggressive over the course of the last 8 years. While we have had, active diplomacy, John Kerry's been in there. We've been pointing the finger at him publicly in very strong ways, and yet doing nothing that actually undermined his movement across his area. Everybody understands. You really think that Rex Tillerson doesn't understand that this is a man who wants to spread Russian power back to the glory days?
Well, if he understands it, he sympathizes with Putin. And Putin, as John McCain said, is a thug and a murderer. Look, people in Washington, Martha, want realpolitik, cold logic. Putin has an emotional core, a visceral hatred of the United States, blames us for the collapse of the Soviet Union, blames us unjustly for all of Russia's woes. He wants to hurt us even if it hurts Russia. Now, in the short term, he wants sanctions lifted, because we did put more sanctions on in the wake of Crimea and Ukraine, and they are hurting the Russian economy. We didn't do enough. Obama certainly is not a model of effectiveness, but we did something. Putin wants the sanctions lifted. He wants NATO destroyed, Europe divided. He wants the empire of the czars in the long term restored territorially,
no, I understand,
and he wants the United States humiliated.
Is, what we've done so far is to sort of publicly berate and then allow him to do whatever he wants. So now you have a situation where the person who's been nominated, and I don't know, we don't know whether or not he's the right person for the job, but I'm just saying, perhaps somebody who does have a relationship with him, and perhaps that's what, President-elect Donald Trump is trying to do, to not throw out any not to throw down any markers out of the gate, because he wants to keep his friends, close and his enemies much, much closer. I mean, perhaps that tactic is perhaps a way to go.
Look, I know the Russians. It won't work. We're suckers for the Russians. I'm afraid the President-elect is being suckered. And I do not trust anybody who has done mega-billion-dollar deals with Putin's government.
So you're saying that you think he's an agent for Vladimir Putin? Is that what you're saying?
No. I think he's what the Russians call a useful idiot, someone who puts the profit motive above the welfare of the United States. You can't do business with Putin's Russia without getting dirty. It can't be done. And I want to see somebody who puts America's interests in front of those of ExxonMobil. Sorry. And I tell you, look, again, the President-elect is doing a lot of good things. But I want to hear him at least criticize the bombing of hospitals and clinics in Syria.
Let me ask you this. Believe me, I understand what you're saying. But let me ask you this. In terms of who you think, because we've been through a number of picks. We saw, the Rudy Giuliani situation. Petraeus, apparently, according to the reports, once they started digging in, they were nervous about his confirmation. Now, I think this morning we've heard from both Mitch McConnell and Senator John McCain, who I spoke to a little while ago, that this may be the one that they decide to push back on. And we know there will be someone along the way. Is that what you're picking up? That he is going to get a very tough confirmation?
Well, he'd better. And I think, really with this problem with Putin, this could be John McCain's finest hour as a politician. The one voice, the venerable voice, standing up and saying, no, Putin is not our friend. Because, Martha, Putin is not our friend. He just hates us. And Washington doesn't like terms like hate or passion. But Putin hates us with a passion.
Well, President-elect Donald Trump doesn't hesitate to mark enemies where he sees them. Do you think so? Do you think that's true?
Yeah, but why is he so devoted to Putin? Why won't he ever criticize him? Why does he praise him? His campaign was infected with people like Paul Manafort, very pro-Russian. He's gone, of course, but there were others. And Martha, honestly, I am not and never have been a conspiracy theorist. But two things. One, I think there's a whole lot more backstory on the relationship with Russia and the Trump campaign. And the other thing is, I think Vladimir Putin is still being underestimated in his efforts to tilt the election, and I believe they were efforts to tilt the election. He may have pulled off the greatest coup of spycraft of the century.
We will see.